how are you?
Hey, good. How are you? Busy?
Good. I am so excited to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
It's my pleasure.
Apparently, I need to send your wife like a huge thank you. I don't know her personally, I don't think, but she sounds like a gem.
She is, or I would not be around anymore. She's a very patient woman,
Bless her.
Right, exactly, over and over. Yeah, randomly one day, she's like, I was listening to this one Nicole girl, and she said I need to get my protein in no matter what. To lay the groundwork for your macros for the day.
Yes, I love it. No nonsense nutrition. I love that she's listening and putting it to practice.
Yeah. So you're Nicole, and you have a podcast named
The Health, Wellth, and Wisdom Podcast, but Wellth is Wellth.
Okay, gotcha. How many times do you have to explain that to people?
Usually not very often because I can just send them a link, which is the beauty of working remotely. I see a lot more people on video calls and like on the internet than I do in real life. In real life, I'm actually kind of a hermit.
Okay, gotcha. You know what's funny is that my old neighbor was such an introvert. I would try to have conversations with him, like in the hall, walking in the neighborhood. Nothing. Like occasionally we'd get like one or two sentences out of him.
Okay, I'm not that bad. I tell everybody I'm an introvert that does a really good job at extroverting. So I recharge when I'm by myself, but I like to think like I'm perfectly capable of maintaining a healthy conversation.
Right. But the ironic thing about this guy is that I started following him on Snapchat, and he's just like manic, hyper energy, making all these crazy videos. I'm like, what in the hell's going on here? It's like two different guys. Yeah.
His alter ego comes out when he's in front of a video camera, I guess.
I guess so. He's a star. He's like he's very empathic. So he's like very in touch with everything. But when he's alone, he just goes off on social media. It's kind of funny. It's like opposite. All right. So let's get down to business, stranger. Now that I know.
Yes.
Where are you from?
I am actually from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is often referred to as Amish country.
Ah, are you Amish?
I am not Amish, although that's the next question everybody always asks. Recently, however, my husband and I relocated from PA to Florida because my parents have lived down here for about a decade. They love it. They started as snowbirds and they've been begging us to move down ever since. And I was like, I'll never live in Florida. First of all, because I am very, very pale and have to wear like SPF 75 and just do not belong in the sun. But also it just didn't feel like my kind of climate. I am eating my words because now I am a Florida resident and we moved down because our plan is to grow our family through adoption. And my parents are very supportive in helping with childcare. So here we are.
There you go. What part of Florida?
We live in Lakewood Ranch, which is about an hour south of Tampa, which most people listening are probably familiar with.
Yeah, you mean the town you said or Tampa?
Tampa.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, my brother lives in Tampa, so I'm very familiar. Well, not very familiar, but I've been there a couple times.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so Florida's kind of like the wild, wild west.
Oh my gosh. I was just talking to someone today online because I don't talk to anyone in person. And she was like, I would love to move to Florida, but I just feel like I can't, like with the political climate, I just can't move down there. And I said, this was my very biggest fear is like, I'm going to be the only person wearing a mask and everyone's going to look at me like I'm the weirdo. It's not that serious where I am. Like I am treated as a normal person. So
okay, gotcha.
There's a good mix of us.
Right. I'm in Minneapolis.
Okay.
And normally I'm the only guy without a mask. So I'm like,
I love it.
Staring at me. You selfish asshole. I'm just like, all right.
It takes all kinds, as they say, right?
Yeah, exactly. So have you read any good books lately?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have
don't
not
make me hang
read.
Up.
Sorry, what was that?
I said, don't make me hang up.
I am a big reader, and the latest book I read was by Colleen Hoover, who is an amazing author. Not like a self-help book, very much just
gotcha.
pleasure, drama, like read just for fun.
Mhm.
But as far as like educational content, I'm a huge advocate of Glennon Doyle, and she recently came out with a book called Untamed. And I binged that and am now onto her podcast, which is called We Can Do Hard Things. So a little pleasure, a little work, a little play.
Yeah.
That's what's been on my reading shelf lately.
A good balance. That sounds, I like the, what's the name of her podcast?
We Can Do Hard Things.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's right up my alley.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. How was the book?
It was great. She is very unapologetic, teaching other individuals to kind of be unapologetic rather than fitting into societal norms. Just embrace like who you are and who you want to be. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it and I'm killing it, but it's a great book. You have to read it.
Okay. Well, everything that she's talking about, I like to be
great.
about.
Yes. Yes.
So how did you get started? So you're a health coach, from what I understand. I listened to one episode of your podcast today with a girl from Australia, like a manifestation girl, I think. Yeah.
Very cool.
So that was good.
Yeah.
You meet her online too?
I did.
Okay.
How'd you guess? Yes. We met online. I consider myself an online nutrition coach. And to kind of give you a little background, I don't remember where I heard this, but I once heard that we go into the fields, the career fields, where we were once the most messed up. And that may not be true for everybody. It's totally true for me. Mm-hmm. I had a really, I don't know if you swear on your podcast, I was going to say fucked up relationship with food.
Yeah, that's right.
Totally cool. Okay. And it was a disaster. So taking you back a little further, I grew up in a pretty perfect family, never had any issues with food. Fun movement was always really prioritized. Didn't have a mom who was like crash dieting all the time or encouraged me to diet. No issues whatsoever. And when I was in high school, my brother started struggling with substance use. And I didn't know how to deal with that. Like I had no tools. My life started feeling very imperfect because I couldn't help him navigate that. And so I was seeking control. I didn't know this at the time, but I was seeking control. And so I started punishing my body with exercise, running miles and miles every day, and punishing my body by eating 999 calories a day. Because I'm very type A and very anal, firstborn, like numbers were something I could obsess over pretty easily.
Right.
So did that for a couple years. Completely destroyed my body, stopped getting a period, broke my hip, broke my back. It was terrible. And basically, this is a long story short, but I realized, oh my gosh, this terrible relationship with food doesn't really have anything to do with food. It has to do with my lack of control and my perceived control that I was giving myself by manipulating calories and overtraining. And I really needed a therapist to help me deal with the grief of, kind of what was happening in my life and what I could not control. And then I realized, wow, if I struggle with this, I bet there are so many other women who have trauma surrounding their relationship with food. And they think it's because they have no self-control or there's something wrong with them. When in reality, there's something going on inside, like this internal darkness that they just haven't addressed. So then I went to get my master's in nutrition, physical activity, and public health, and committed my life to helping other women navigate food stuff and mindset stuff and emotional stuff, because it's just so convoluted and messy. And I think sometimes it's oversimplified, when you're on social media and you hear people talking about like calorie deficits and here's a great booty workout. It's sometimes not that simple.
Right. A lot of variables and a whole lot of nuance. So
yes, a whole lot of nuance. Nothing that you can fit in like an Instagram caption. That's for sure.
Right. They cut you out. Then you have to go into, some of those people have those really long captions and they go at the bottom, it says continued in the comments.
Yeah.
Right. So how old were you when that happened?
I was early 20s, probably 20, 21.
Gotcha. So that's it's a hard time. It's like you're just starting to kind of figure out where you are or who you are, what your identity is going to be. And not only that, usually people aren't super financially stable by then, career stable, relationship stable. There's a whole lot of instability. And then that happens with your brother, which I'm sorry for. I can't imagine what that would be like, because I have two brothers. One I'm not really close with, one I'm really close with. But if either one of them, I love them equally. It's just like, I don't know what I would do. I'd probably crumble it for a little bit and then come out stronger, hopefully, usually. So sorry for that. But that time of your life, it's so much instability, and then you have that happen. It makes sense that you're looking for the one thing that you can control in your life.
Totally. And I think for me, it was even exacerbated. I grew up in a really conservative Christian family where there was very clear boundaries between right and wrong. And growing up at that age, you're kind of deconstructing what you were always taught and then trying to figure out, like, well, what do I actually believe and where do I actually stand? So there was also a little bit of that of like, well, if we can't talk about addiction in the church because it's bad and it's sinful and it's evil, who can we talk to about it? Like, why are we being so fake about this? Like, I feel like if someone is genuinely struggling and just needs help, and like, we can't bring shame into the equation. So it just kind of convoluted the whole situation for me.
Yeah, I feel like that type of church or philosophy, they have to read the second part of the book.
Yeah.
Like
they're missing the nuance. Yeah.
The back half. And a lot of people struggle with like cutting.
Yes.
And stuff like that, because it gives them, it's kind of meditative because it's the only thing you focus on is that little bit of pain, right? And it's like, you can control that. And
it's interesting that you say that, because my brother had a tattoo on the inside of his forearm, and he struggled with addiction for about 8 years until he overdosed and passed away. But when he was in a period of recovery, because he was in and out of rehabs, he got a tattoo on his arm that said, "I feel now," in Italian, because we are Italian, believe it or not. And that was just a really great depiction of the fact that when you're really struggling with depression or with anxiety, both of which he struggled with, or you're in an addiction of any kind, be it with food or with substances, you're not actually feeling, like you're avoiding your feelings with these coping mechanisms that are not very helpful in the long term, but in the short term, take the feeling away. And so with cutting, I believe my understanding of it is it's very similar. Like, you actually feel something in the moment. It gives you control, but you're actually like feeling the pain, which is better than just the numbing coping mechanism.
Right. Which is, I have a big problem. So I was diagnosed with tons of shit when I was younger. They try to tell me like what my limitations are and what I have and what I need and what I can't do, the basic, like the broad brush of like, you're broken, and this pill will fix it kind of thing. So I never really, I didn't like authority either. So if some doctor told me to do something, I'm like, I don't think so. And I'm still kind of like that. I kind of fight it, a little bit, but I was lucky because when I was like 14, 15, so I moved out when I was 15 because my mom was not in a good spot, and she struggled with addiction and still does. So I moved out when I was 15, and they're like, "Oh, I think you need to go have an evaluation with these mental health people," right? They had to give me a questionnaire, and then a half hour later, they have like Zoloft and like a couple, or whatever the medication of the day was, like antidepressant, anti-anxiety. And then I just ask them, why do I need these? They're like, because you're having really dark thoughts. I'm like, oh, so this will help me think, better thoughts? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay. So I just ripped it up in my car. I'm like, on the way home. So
that sounds like it's really poor medical guidance. It's a pill. We're not going to know how it's actually going to help or why you should take it, but just trust us and take this.
Right. Yeah. So, and ever since then, I've always had like a bad taste in my mouth from just the lack of, I think it probably comes down to they're so busy, they don't have time to research the newest stuff, and they don't have time to like figure out all the layers of each human that they interact with, right? So they're like trying to do what they can that goes by their flow chart. Oh, symptom, symptom, symptom. Oh, here's a medication, you know? And it makes the whole nation sick because we're not attacking like root cause of things, which can be trauma, can be, it probably all comes down to trauma. Like if there's one thing that can mess up everything, it's some kind of trauma that you're either unaware of that is affecting things, or you're ashamed of it, so you're embarrassed to do the work, even with a trained therapist or whatever. What do you think about this whole industry, since you're basically right in the middle of it?
Yeah, it's actually really fascinating. My brain's going like 100 miles a minute, because before I ventured out on my own and started my own nutrition coaching business, I worked part-time for a local health system in Pennsylvania, and I was considered a health promotion specialist. And my particular areas of expertise were mental health and substance use. And the one thing that working for a hospital, we got to see was what primary care providers or physicians are struggling with, and how we could kind of connect community resources so that we could take the burden off of the primary care physician. Because you're right, they have 15 minutes to see you. They're getting reimbursed for like prescribing medications, which may or may not be what the person actually needs. And they are not trained in psychology. They are not trained in nutrition, right? Like they're trained in treatment.
Right. So the average MD has how much nutrition? Like 8 hours or something?
36 hours total of nutrition education is what I have researched.
Like, wow.
So oftentimes when we go to their doctors don't have referrals to give them. Maybe they don't have a dietitian working in the office. I work with several primary care providers who will gladly give my cards to patients, but sometimes the only advice they have is, hey, I tried keto and it worked for me. Do you want it? Like, without any knowledge of what the patient has tried before, maybe their traumatic dieting history. So one thing that I realized working as this health promotion specialist was it's not the doctor's fault. It's the system that is like ultimately flawed, because they don't have the resources to send you to a therapist. And that connection is not very streamlined. So while they may have like a personal name to give you, it's not a smooth, warm handoff. And then there was this compounding factor of the fact that fewer people are going to school to become psychologists and psychiatrists, because the burnout rate is so freaking high. Like so many people, and this was before COVID, so many people need mental health care that people are like, nah, I don't want to go to school for that. That sounds terrible. So now physicians have even fewer people to refer to, and they are a treatment-based model. Whereas I try to come from the prevention side, right? Like, hey, let's prevent you from getting diabetes. Let's prevent coronary artery disease. Like, let's work on creating healthy habits now so that your quality of life improves for the rest of your life. Whereas most of what our healthcare system does is just like, here's a Band-Aid, here's a Band-Aid, forget about the underlying trauma. Like, here's a Band-Aid. And it works for a while until it doesn't.
Right. Yeah. That is just, it's insane to me, and it drives me crazy. And I've read way too many books that are like about big pharma and like just the capitalistic incentives that go along with a body. There's a price tag on every patient, and that's not why people go into these fields, right? They go in mostly, I would say, generally because they want to help people. They get into the system and just grinds on them, and then they become a robot that just writing out prescriptions left and right.
Right. And I can't even imagine like the amount of trauma that healthcare providers are experiencing now with kind of the, everything going on with COVID and experiencing like an influx of patients. I have talked with several nurses. I work with several people that are in the healthcare industry, and they're just tapped. They're just done. They are not even able to take care of themselves mentally and physically. And what we know is that if we're not able to like put our own oxygen mask on and take care of ourselves, we're worthless to anybody else, whether that's in like a parent-child relationship or it's in a nurse-patient relationship.
Or marriage.
Or marriage, any relationship.
Right,
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Wild. Do you think, so I've never had therapy, and I don't know if we haven't really been following each other for more than a couple of weeks, but my life is like a movie, basically. And I should have done a lot of therapy by now. And it's not that I would be ashamed or anything like that. I'm just grinding it out on my own, learning tools here and there, and finally I've come to this place where I'm like, but I know that next battle is around the corner,
Right.
mental battle, physical battle, loss, relationship conflict. It's always on the way, the next hard thing. So I keep looking into it. I just haven't done it yet.
I have a very interesting relationship with therapy. So I actually was going to school. My undergrad degree was in health psychology because I wanted to be a therapist. Like I wanted to be the person that people shared their struggles with and could help them find healthier avenues. And then when I was in school was when I started struggling with all this food stuff. So I was like, okay, I can't be a therapist. I'm way too messed up.
Yeah, I'm not good
so let me go to study nutrition instead. And what I realized is like, what I do now is a marriage between mindset and nutrition science, because so much that has to do with food has absolutely nothing to do with food. But throughout this process, because I had learned so much about psychology, and then several years later, my brother passed away, I told my husband, who was not my husband at the time, I said, I'm going to try to do this myself. I'm going to figure out this grief thing myself. I went to school. I know what I need to know. I'll be fine. But something inside me gave him a trump card. And I said, if you really see me struggling and I just can't see it and things are not going well, you maybe just give me a nudge. Like, hey, I think it's time. So he let me like flounder and figure things out for myself about 6 months, and things were not going great because oftentimes we can do something by ourselves, but it's much harder and it takes a lot longer to figure something out with only the tools that we have and our perspective. And so he was like, I think you need to go see somebody. So that was my first toe dip into therapy. And I have been in therapy ever since. And that was over 6 years ago. And I love it. And I think sometimes it's not even that anything's going wrong. It's just another perspective that
it's like a human journal with a little feedback.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
And my therapist like pulls no shit. So she like makes you think about the things you don't want to think about, and just kind of, pulls out the things where maybe our human brains would be like, let's tuck that away for like a late, let's just come up with an excuse to not deal with that. And so I think it just allows me to push through the resistance a little bit faster than what I probably would do on my own. And actually one thing that she likes to say that you reminded me of this with what you just said is she says, rupture is required. Repair is optional. So life is always going to blow up, right? Like there's always going to be loss. There's always going to be grief. There's always going to be, miscommunication. That's going to happen. But whether we choose to repair the rupture and to move through it in a healthy way, totally optional. We could keep just pounding our head against the wall and making the same mistakes over and over again, or we could figure it out.
Yeah. So what do you think? So I'm almost 40. And when I grew up, there was like a certain tone. Okay. It's like, you have to prepare yourself for life because life is hard, and now there's more of a tone where it's like, you kind of want to hide from life a little bit. You want, everywhere you go, there's just everything, everywhere you go, people should just make a nice little safe space for you everywhere, right? Work, the gym, traffic. And that's not very close to reality. And I don't like it because here's why. I believe in like developing essential skills. So, the old saying, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
I have never heard that expression before.
Okay. But if you think about it, a warrior can be very peaceful and live a very peaceful life gardening. And if a war comes to his backyard, he's prepared and he's ready to confront that battle.
Right.
But if it's just a gardener and the only thing is the gardening, and then the war breaks out, you have no chance. So that's kind of like my philosophy with life is like, do hard things, confront life like it's going to kick your ass at some point, and be ready for it, because for sure the next battle is coming. So when everyone's like trying to put a bubble around people, I'm just like, that's not going to help them. That's not going to help them. Like, what are we doing here? We're making people think that everywhere they go, they should be protected by society. But
it's
then,
sort of like helicopter parenting, right?
right?
Like
Yeah, it doesn't
everybody
work.
wins, everybody gets a trophy.
Yeah, no, definitely not. I didn't grow up that way. I don't believe that at all, because I've experienced, maybe it comes with experience. Like maybe you're in a bubble your whole life and you're like, holy shit, I just got my ass kicked for 4 years straight by life itself. And nobody came to save me. I had to do the work myself.
I think it does come with experience, because my upbringing was very much like happy bubble, right? Like perfect kind of perception of life. It is what you make it, right? Like positive attitude, not like toxically positive, but like everything through rose-colored glasses.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, there's those people that are so happy for like no reason. They're on the verge of like manic all the time. I'm like, is that real? Like, are you
good
actually
vibes
that?
only? Yeah.
Right. Like, okay.
I totally get that. That used to be me. And that actually, speaking of therapy, I met with my therapist one of the very first times, and she was like, Nicole, have you seen the movie Inside Out? Have you seen it?
Mm-mm.
You have to watch it. It's like a kid's movie. It's a cartoon. And
is it this Emotions?
Yes.
Oh, my wife compares me to the guy that blows his top.
Oh, the anger guy.
and she's more Joy.
Yes. So I was Joy like all the time. And my therapist was like, Nicole, you can't put sadness in a circle, which is a quote from the movie. Like they try to put sadness in this little boundary and be like, no, we don't want to be sad, right? Like go away. Yeah. And she was like, you have to learn how to feel everything. Like life is the spectrum. And so I learned very quickly through my brother's addiction that like life isn't happy all the time. It's kind of hard all the time with pockets of happiness. But I think psychologically speaking, if we look at the full range of human emotions, most of them are not happy. Like there's two happy, right? Like there's joy and happiness, but most of them are like fear and anxiety and anger. And we have to learn how to feel all of those and be on the spectrum rather than, I mean, my eyes were blinded when I was just like happy, happy, joy, joy all the time, because I wasn't really feeling, I wasn't really processing. But I think, like you said, that came with life experience and being forced out of that like false happiness lens.
So were your parents like really proactive in like protecting you, or was it just things were so good you didn't have a lot of hardships?
Things were so good. And I think also it came with like the Christianity thing too, like pray about it, like God will answer your prayers, like everything will figure itself out, right? So it was kind of, everything will be taken care of. So there wasn't a lot of need to stress or struggle. I don't think my parents were fantastic in their parenting style, so they weren't overly protective. I think there was just very little need to struggle. Not that like bad things didn't happen, but it just, it's kind of, that's an interesting question. I don't really know how to think about that, but I think it was just this like culture that we grew up in. It was like, oh, everything will be fine, right? Like if it's meant to be, it'll be. That was a big thing that I hate now. Or like everything happens for a reason. No, it doesn't. Sometimes shit just happens.
Right. But humans, we have to give it a reason to like move forward, That's I think you and I grew up exactly the opposite, which is interesting that we came to the kind of the similar conclusion.
Yes.
So
my husband and I are exactly the same, like polar opposites growing up, and now we have a lot more in common.
Right. And you think, let's see, some people are like, oh, relationships shouldn't be hard. And then I'm like, well, there's definitely hard parts of relationships. Like if everyone's just like not challenging each other, like the one. So I'll tell you a story about my wife. Okay. We met on a dating app before like Tinder or any of the like ones that would get you in trouble.
Right.
So which thank God, because I would have just been like one of those guys just swiping like someone's gonna like me. But we met on this app, and she's talking about like her faith is important to her, like everything's good, just like super, super loving and nice person. And I grew up homeless, living on the streets, mom addicted to crack, pimp slapping her, like not knowing where our next meal is going to come from, and like just chaos, violence all over the place. So I was like, this is never going to work. This woman's way too nice. So I slowly quit talking to her. Probably 3 weeks or a month after I stopped like texting her back. One day she just out of the blue, one Saturday afternoon, she's like, "You're an asshole. ... And I'm like, I know.
She called you out.
Like, yeah. And I was like, and then then she said, do you want to hang out with me ever? Because I'm not going to force you to, or I'm not going to force you to hang out with me. Something like that. Basically, listen, asshole, I value myself. And if you don't waste my time and disappear like that. Tell me what's going on. I just said, what are you doing tomorrow? And then we hung out. I skipped my first Vikings game in like forever. She didn't even like football. And now we're married, and she is more obsessed with football than I am. So it's just like, what happened? But I needed someone to contend with. She's the oldest. I'm the oldest in our sibling order. And man, we love hard. Like we love each other. But it's taken a lot of work. And I'm always in trouble for my tone. Like, watch your tone. I'm like, well, I just asked you the same question 4 times. And I didn't get an answer. So now my tone's changing. She gives me a lecture, and she's like, oh, I think our definitions of lecture are different. I'm like, but man, our relationship is amazing. But there's like a constant like back and forth, making each other better,
I think that's necessary. Like, I think there has to be an element of give and take. Like it sounds like your weaknesses are her strengths and vice versa. And I think my relationship with my husband is very similar to that. And I don't know that I would say any relationship I've ever had has taken work. And I don't just mean like romantic relationships, like friendships take work, right? Like,
right.
I think there has to be some like level of agreement of, hey, I'm here for you and you're here for me, but our needs are not always going to align perfectly. So like, that means there's some sacrifice involved. And that's hard to deal with sometimes if we're not on the same page. I think just like, rupture is required, repair is optional. It's the same thing with a relationship. Like there's always going to be breakdown, misunderstandings, poor communication, whatever. And I think you just have to be willing to figure it out. Like it sounds like you and your wife figure it out, even if you're disagreeing. And then, right. Sparks fly, you figure it out and things are fine. You move on to the next day. But yeah, I don't think it's easy.
Yeah. You know how I get her? Here's how I get her. We'll just be in the middle of like a fight about nothing. We don't even know why we're fighting. There's just tension. But I just look at her and I just keep smiling because I can't help it. I'm like, what are we fighting about here? And then she's like, don't give me that look. And then eventually she softens up, and maybe I'll apologize, or maybe I'll wait a little bit. I don't know. She says I'm bad at apologizing right away. So, which I would agree with, because I don't want to apologize and not mean it. Especially if someone's like, you need to apologize right now. I'm just like, well,
that's an authority thing, right? Like that's someone telling you what to do, and your brain is like, I don't think so. No.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So when you guys have conflict, what's that like?
So first of all, I think we have Hold Me Closely, Hold Me Tightly. I'm forgetting the name of the book. Anyway, it was recommended by our therapist. We both read it. And this book talked about acknowledging your individual raw spots. So like, what are the plate, like for you have this thing with authority, or like someone telling you what to do that rubs you a little raw, right? Like it irritates a sore spot. And for me, when I feel like threatened, or I would probably get really upset with your tone, because sometimes my husband, who had to like raise his voice to be heard in his family, he'll say something at a slightly higher volume or in a tone that just feels somewhat aggressive to me. And I will shut down. I'll be like, nope, I don't want to, we didn't deal with anger. In my household growing up, I thought anger was an overrated emotion, and I never got angry. And so if someone is like the slightest bit angry, I will shut down. No feelings. Like I'm going to go by myself and deal alone. And so my raw spot is acknowledging that defensiveness and choosing to stay in the moment, and to recognize his slightly higher volume is not necessarily anger. It's just his way of communicating. And he has his own raw spots that he's aware of. So it's really doing our own stuff inside so that we can both be fully present and not stuck in our trauma from when we were children. And we had, learned these ways of coping to keep us safe.
What's the one thing that would get him?
The one thing that I know would get him. So I would say, because we grew up so differently, and I have seemingly was always following, I was a rule follower.
Ooh.
He was not. He was
that's my kind of guy.
To yourself. Yeah, I think you guys would be good friends. But there's some things that he doesn't feel awesome about from his past that he's working through individually. So if I were to ever make him feel bad or shameful for anything from his past, major raw spot for him. So that's something that I really try to guard my words against, even if it's could potentially be misconstrued, right? I'm not actually trying to shame him, but that's something that would really irritate him. Yeah.
It could be accidental. You need to learn how to save more money because maybe, like me, you grew up poor and you're not good at saving. And I would be like, what do you mean? Oh, because I'm poor, I didn't save,
Guards go up, right? Hackles. Yeah. You're you're attacking my person. And it's no, this was just one comment taken out of context that really hit a raw spot for you.
Right. Yeah. I'm trying to think. My wife would probably get me just by telling me what I need to do. And she does quite often. But most of the time I internalize things because I want to become, I want to hit my potential. So even though I'm rough around the edges, a little bit of a wild man and kind of unpredictable, I'm always how could I do this better? So if she told me what to do and it's something that I know maybe I should do something better or different, I'm that pisses me off. And I'm not going to tell her right now, but she's right.
It's I wanted to get there first. I wanted to have the answer.
Yeah. So, man, relationships are beautiful though. It's this wild ride where it's the whole spectrum of emotions, right? All of it, right there.
Do you guys have kids?
No, we're trying. And I was going to ask about your adoption situation because we've been trying probably 5-6 years, and we've gotten pregnant at one time and had a miscarriage early on. And the way I grew up, I'm maybe a guy like me needs to have 5-6 underdogs. I'm just this is my tribe, and I do have a daughter who is 22, and I had her when I was a senior in high school with my girlfriend that didn't work out. Imagine that. A kid with a ton of trauma and insecurity, and grew up how I did. Hooked up with a girl that was completely opposite of that. It didn't work out, and I'm still to this day trying to rebuild that relationship, but it hasn't happened yet. It's she's a young adult now, so it's kind of on her. I've been really reaching out for 7 years, and we had a lunch date planned, but it fell apart, So the kid situation is going to be a whole nother roller coaster, but it's for sure going to happen one way or another. I just don't know what the outcome will be besides a beautiful mixed family.
And that's exactly actually why I brought it up, because relationships are so beautiful. And I think my husband and I recently have been getting serious about this adoption process. And I think there's something extra beautiful about bringing two people together to be like, but how are we going to mesh like your stuff and my stuff and like the goods and the bads and the lessons and the trauma to try to not traumatize this small human being that's like starting with a blank slate, right? Like how can we bring the beauty together? And that's been something that we've had some conversations around, just because we have different upbringings, we have different faiths, we have different, there's just so much that's different. And while there's so much that's the same, it just kind of is so cool to watch that come together and have those conversations. We do not have children yet, but just like embarking on the process is like, wow, we get to choose how we want to do this, and how, not that we're going to do it perfectly, but we get to choose what we're not going to continue, like generational trauma, and what we are going to continue because we felt like it was so helpful and loving for us to experience.
Yeah, that's wild. And there's a lot of kids that have nobody, right? Absolutely nobody to love them. It's so weird. It's like I see little kids around here, I'm like, I would adopt all these kids, but I would.
Which is interesting because, okay, so you're talking about like Florida political dynamic earlier in our conversation. This is something that we're learning we have to guard ourselves against. But my husband is a personal trainer, so he works with a lot of people in person. And so he has shared with some of his clients that we're in the process of adopting. And some people are really turned off by that because they believe like you should have your own flesh and blood, or like you don't want your baby to look like you, and I understand like the road looks so different for everybody. I grew up with parents fostering other children. So I grew up with other kids in our household, and that was because they couldn't be in their household. The goal was always to connect them back with their birth family. But sometimes being in that birth family is not what's best for them. It's not what's healthy. And so then you have these children who are in the system or are left without anyone to love them. So I always had a heart for adoption and wanting to open my home to someone who didn't have one. And ultimately, that's what we decided was best for us. We haven't tried to have our own children as far as we know we could, but this was just the route that we felt like we needed to like we truly believe that your family is what you make it, and not just your biological flesh and blood. So it's something that has been interesting that we weren't quite expecting, where some people are very against it. And it's this beautiful process of providing a home for someone that doesn't have one or wouldn't have one that was healthy for them. So in my mind, I'm like, I don't understand where the disconnect is, but.
Right. Yeah. We've had mixed, everyone's like, are you trying? We always have to have that. I just see my wife's heart just kind of get ripped apart a lot when they're like, oh, my friend's pregnant again for the fourth time by accident, or like, just because when you have this like fertility issue that you're trying to work through, but she loves people so much that she's happy for this person, genuinely happy for their pregnancy. But there's a part of her that's just like, another one, and we kind of we met each other kind of late. Like I was 30 and she was 31. So, and she was always the one at going to other women's weddings as the bride. I think she's been a bridesmaid like 9 times or something crazy like that. And she's always been the one that's like, oh, when are you going to get married? So now it's went from that to like, oh, when are you going to have kids? And then we're like, well, maybe we'll adopt if it doesn't happen, well, we're going to adopt if it does happen, or if it doesn't happen, we're going to still adopt. Right. But some people are like, oh, that's beautiful. It's awesome. And then there's others like, you want someone else's kid? I'm like, no, dickhead. I want to change a life somehow.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it is weird how they're like a beautiful thing could have like some kind of stigma. Like, or what kind of shallow people are in this world, you know? And
It's wild. It is wild. And I can't imagine, like, oh, my heart breaks for your wife, because I mean, essentially every time someone makes a comment like that or posts like a birth announcement, it's a grieving process. I didn't realize, obviously I had to navigate the grief of my brother's passing, but I also, a couple times throughout my therapy experience, my therapist would help me understand, like, grief is just accepting the loss of something that didn't go the way that you expected it to. And so that could be anything, right? Like, you can grieve a life that you thought you were going to have. You can grieve the passing of a loved one, or the lack of an existence of someone that you thought was going to be in your life. So it's just so heartbreaking that every time someone makes a comment like that, simply because they're trying to abide by like some societal construct, right? Like, you should get married. That's like what you're supposed to do. You should have your own children. That's what you're supposed to do. Soon it'll be something else, right? Like, have you made this much money by this year old? And there's always something, right? That's why you have to say, like, forget it. I'm doing my own thing. I don't care if it fits your mold or not.
Yeah. I always was real insecure when people would be like, so what do you do? Because I'm like, I'm trying to figure it out, right? I just got out of jail. Like, I'm trying to get my life back together. Like, I went to 2 years of community college just to play football. like I'm trying to figure it out, you know? And like, even right after high school, I was real insecure. So where are you going to school? I'm like, I don't know. Junior college? Like, what are you gonna do? I don't know. Like, I want to play sports for sure, and I'm gonna make some mistakes along the way. I'm probably gonna chase women that aren't right for me. I'm probably gonna fight people that I shouldn't fight. You know, like, I was just like, there's something wrong with me a little bit. Still, I'm still trying to kind of tame it down, because, man, I like a good fight. I don't know. Like, I walk down the street and there'd be like 3 or 4 guys kind of looking shady, you know? And I'm like, man, I hope they fuck with me right now. Like, I'm outnumbered. I'm going to get my ass kicked, but I'm like, I'm down to party. Let's go. So I'm trying to get that kind of wild side out of me. And I ruptured my ACL, my MCL, and my meniscus like a year and a half ago.
Oh, geez.
And sports is like huge, like, meditation basically for me, because when you're competing, everything else falls away. It's like, I'm trying to beat this person right here, right now, and that's it, you know? And it's like, it's just awesome when everything dissolves and you have one mission, which I feel like, do you meditate or anything like that?
I do meditate. I think the definition of meditation can be a little funny for some people sometimes. I have a really hard time shutting my brain off. So for me, meditation is me like sitting on a pillow on my floor and trying not to think of anything for like 30 seconds. And inevitably, like, my brain will think of all the things. So it's really now turned into like just accepting those thoughts and not trying to cling to any of them, but just letting them exist, which has worked out much better for me than trying not to think anything. That's what I thought meditation should be, but I learned that's not how the brain works.
Yeah. No, if you like, so there's been a couple times where I've meditated and I was like, holy shit, that was awesome. Like, what just happened right there? But mostly it's me, oh, go back to your breath, or, oh, it's a thought. You don't have to cling on to it and then go down the rabbit hole. And I'm a thinker, you know? So I go down like the rabbit hole hard. So like one thought will come, and then the connection to that thought. And then usually it's like, oh, I could build a great business if I just had that. Oh, you know, like, I'm sure your marketing mind is always just going, or like the way you can serve your clients better, or like how you can have a better podcast or website, or it's just like always there. And you can't shut it off. But in meditation, it just comes and then it goes. And then you just go back to, here I am. And you're like, oh, there's another thought. Oh, just let it go. Don't cling on to it.
Right.
I'm not good at that.
Me either.
I cling on to it. And then I realized like 10 minutes later, I'm like, oh shit, I just planned my next takeover of the world and I'm supposed to be meditating.
My therapist gave me this hack once where, because I was sucking at this so much, she said, pretend you're in a bubble. And like, if the thought comes, fine, but it's your goal to just like push it out of the bubble, right? Like just
like the thoughts in a bubble.
Like you are in this bubble and the thought might come in and your goal is just to like push the thought out. So you are the only thing in the bubble. So it's just sort of like okay, that's fine. Thank you, brain, but go away now, right? Like I'm not going to hold on to it and let this consume my thought process for the next 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever have you played sports?
Yes.
Which ones?
All of them. Grew up in a small private Christian school. So all of them. We did not have a football team, but I played soccer and volleyball and basketball. And I was even on the golf team, which is not something that I advertise, but yes.
What was your favorite?
Soccer, hands down.
Yeah? Why?
I don't know. I think when I was good at it and I like doing things that I'm good at.
Self-select.
Basketball, not my forte, despite being 5'9". And it's also a team sport, I think, which was really cool. So I like the team dynamic way more than like golf is just so boring. My dad would kill me if he heard me saying that because he's a big golfer. But yeah, I just loved the teamwork, camaraderie.
Well, some old guy told me, because he's like, do you golf? I'm like, maybe like once every 3 years I'll go golfing, and I suck so bad. I'm just like, I just get pissed. And I think that if I just get angry and hit it harder, it's going to go straight. But no, it never happens that way. It's like when I barely try to hit it, it goes straight. Like,
right.
But he's like, everybody should play golf because you can play it until you're in the grave, basically. Like, that makes sense. But I still don't like it.
My dad is of the same thought process. So it turns out I'm actually fairly decent at the sport, but I hate it.
Oh, must be nice.
His thought process was like, Nicole, you can play it forever, but it's also great networking. So like business meetings happen on the golf course. So it's not just for fun. Like it's also a really great skill set to have. And that worked for a while. Like I gave it a couple years and then I was like, I hate this so much. The last thing I want to do is spend 4 hours hitting a little white ball around into a hole. So I gave up on golf, but I can see the benefit. But walking is also something that most people can do until they're pretty old.
And should do.
Right. Agreed.
Most things we should do, we don't do. Isn't that why?
Why is that?
I don't know. I think you ever heard of self-signaling?
I don't think
It's probably just maybe a different name. It's like you're making a vote for who you're going to be. So like every habit or every time you do something that you know is going to benefit you, or that you know that you should do, when you do it, you give yourself a little vote. You're like, this is the type of person I am. It like shapes your identity.
James Clear.
Oh yeah. James Clear.
Atomic Habits. Yes.
Yeah. It's a great book. Yeah. And, is there anything that has really shaped your identity? That's a hard question because I know
it is a hard question. Like
changes
off the cuff. We go from golf to like what shaped your identity. That was a really big pivot there. I was not prepared for. But I think the biggest thing for me I think, again, this is just like my personality also is a little bit more prone to this, but I grew up with the impression that I had to be perfect or achieve a lot or produce a lot or look the way that people expected me to look in order to be praised, in order to be good enough, in order to be worthy, in order to like enter the gates of heaven, whatever. And the biggest thing that I think shaped my identity, but what helped me reshape it was acknowledging that you're good enough just as you are, right? Like it doesn't matter how much money your business is bringing in this year. It doesn't matter what the number on the back of your jeans says. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You are enough as you are right now. And perfection is a 100% unattainable standard. So it's basically just like a procrastination tactic. And it's robbing other people of the pleasure of actually getting to know who you are as a person. So it's just a front. It's like a shield. And I think Brene Brown has a quote that says something like that. Like perfectionism is actually a shield that just keeps us feeling safe, but it just actually prevents us from having any true relationship whatsoever. So that was a really big thing for me because I did all of the things, right? Like played all of the sports, got straight A's, was on like the honor roll in choir and drama and all the things. And I never got the worthiness that I thought I was going to get from it. I got all the accolades and all the trophies and stuff, but it never actually gave me that like worthiness feeling. Same thing with food. I emaciated myself down to like 8% body fat, size 00, sick, and didn't feel any worthier. Or
still didn't feel good enough, right? Look in the mirror, like I'm fat.
Wouldn't run without a t-shirt on because I did not think I was good enough. So it's just 100% like internal and has nothing to do with body composition or status.
You said, I'm good enough the way I am. So this is like a balancing act, right? It's like, especially for type A personality, like go, right? It's like, I'm good enough, but then there's a devil and an angel. Like, are you? I mean, you could be better. Don't you think you could do a little better? You know? So how do you balance that of like self-acceptance? Like, this is where I am right now. I'm worthy as a human. But how do you also hold yourself accountable to your potential?
This is a good question. And I think the answer is don't put them on opposite ends of the spectrum. So I think it's a big misconception that self-improvement and self-acceptance are opposites. They're not, right? Like I can accept myself and say, I am good enough as I am. And I can also want to be better. The easiest way for me to explain this is so many of my clients come to me wanting to lose body fat in a sustainable way and never diet ever again because diets have failed them over and over again. And what I know is if they try to reach their goal from a place of hate, shame, disgust, or fear, they're never going to get there, right? You can't say, I hate my body, I'm disgusting, and I'm going to work to be better. That doesn't work. You have to do it from a place of acceptance and honoring of your current body. So you can say, my body is good as it is. Like my body shows up for me. My body protects me. My body has allowed me to birth children or climb Mount Everest or whatever, right? And I can still want to improve. I can still want to reach a body fat loss goal. I can still want to reduce my cholesterol. I can still want to improve my relationship with food so I'm not fearful anymore when I go out and eat with my friends. I think they can be the same thing rather than juxtaposed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. It's kind of like integrating your shadow a little bit, right? Like it can be part of the equation. It can be part of the same equation.
Yes.
It's just like, how are you going to work the problem in this day, you know? And you always try to come back to gratitude, self-acceptance. And then you just go cycle. It like oscillates, right?
I think it's like your foundation. Like, are you coming from a place of I'm good, I'm worthy, and I want to work to be better, and I want to work to reach higher heights? Or are you coming from a place of I suck and I hate myself and I want to change this? I just based on the research, like hate is not a great motivator for lasting change. It might cause us to like do something temporarily, but then because
like the fuel to get you started.
Exactly. But you have to have a level of like acceptance and like self-efficacy. Like I can do this. I have done this. I am capable. It's like a growth mindset, right? Rather than a fixed mindset that says, well, it is the way it is and it's never going to change anything. You just have to be willing to say like, I can exist as I am and still want to move forward rather than where I am. It's terrible and I have to move forward. That's like your wife telling you, you have to do this. And you're like,
so my brother, TJ, he's at Savage or Average Coaching. I think he follows you now, maybe. He was a gentleman. When he was 14, he was almost 320 pounds, extremely obese. And one day he found out at school that he was known as Fat TJ. And he hated himself. Like he had so much shame that it put him on that path to start researching macros and exercise and all these different things. And it got him to a place where he's like, okay, his identity started to change. So it was like, it started out as shame, hate, insecurity, and then grew into this guy that is very habit based. Like his lifestyle is, it's all habit. Like he doesn't, and so he used to have pizza, right? And then he'd put pizza rolls on the pizza. And then he'd put cheese on top to make sure the pizza rolls don't fall off. And then you eat the pizza, and then you eat a box of cereal to finish it. Like, and now he doesn't crave any bad food ever. He craves dense macronutrient food. You know, like he's like, oh man, I can't wait to get a piece of salmon and sweet potatoes. And I'm thinking, I want a donut with bacon on it.
Because he changed his identity to someone that eats nutrient dense foods, or like he changed his identity to someone who cares for his body, or someone who is physically active, or, you know, like it's changing who you are as a person, not just your circumstances or what you eat.
Mm-hmm. So you can use that self-hate as like rocket fuel. But if you try to make it to another galaxy just on that initial burst of fuel, that's not going to work, I don't think. Like, how long can you absolutely hate yourself before something bad, God forbid, you know, happens?
I think also, I was actually just talking about this in my newsletter, but I think it's also like what we're actually looking for. So you said your brother's name was TJ?
Yeah.
He didn't like, you know, this nickname that people inappropriately called him at school. So he wanted to change his body so that he was accepted more. Maybe, I don't want to put goals into his mouth, but most of the clients who come work with me, they say, oh, I want to reach this fat loss goal. But once we do a little digging and once we start working together, it's not actually fat loss that they're after. They want to be accepted and loved. They want to be intimate with their spouse without feeling insecure or like completely self-obsessed. They want to be able to go to Disney World with their kids without worrying about whether they're going to fit in the ride or whether they're going to have to get a seatbelt extender in the airplane. So it's more of like a quality of life thing. And so in that regard, you could hate yourself into changing your body, but then you arrive at this place where you have this different body and you're not actually getting any of the thing that you wanted to begin with, like love or belongingness or more confidence or more self-compassion, right? So I think it's also, what the hell are you changing for? Like, what's the purpose of all this? I think that makes a difference too of like what your motivator is.
Yeah. Or you get to that place and you're still like super ripped, really like the physique is amazing, but you're still like an insecure little boy walking around in a muscle suit instead of like integrating the new version of yourself beyond the physical.
Right. You never changed your identity. You just changed the outward appearance. Temporary, right? Like, unless you're going to live your whole life that way, chances are you're going to revert back to the behaviors of your former identity, and then you're going to lose all the external progress. So that's why I'm a big advocate of like, you have to get the mental side on board. You have to figure out like who you want to become, not just what you want to look like, and then embrace that identity along the way.
And start kind of acting yourself into it, you know, that self-signaling.
Exactly.
You know who Marshawn Lynch is?
No, tell me.
He's a running back or a retired running back, but he says, get your mentals right and stack your chicken.
Okay. I am not a football fan, but I can get behind the quote.
Right. Get your mind and your money right, basically is what he's saying. No idea why that popped in my head. Here we are.
We were talking about football earlier.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Tell me something you struggle with still to this day, but you constantly, let's just say you're winning the battle 51% of the time, you do it or confront it successfully. And then, but the 49, you're just like, I'm almost there.
Same thing. Same thing that I mentioned earlier that changed my identity. I still struggle with it. still struggle with wanting to like achieve more, produce more, and have that somehow mean that I'm better or worth more. It still pops into my brain, right? It's just like recovering from disordered eating. For a long time, you still have that little voice in your head that's like, but the calories, but like you shouldn't eat carbs. And the goal is not that we're going to like get rid of that voice altogether, but that it just becomes quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter because you're building this other muscle that's way more confident. So thankfully, I've done a lot of work around this. So now when I'm like, man, like I need to make $100,000 more this year or I'm not going to be good enough, I can be like, Nicole, come on, that's bullshit. Like, stop it. You're falling into that trap again. Don't do it. You know better than this. And, then I can kind of recite some positive affirmations, deal with typically when I'm struggling with that, it's because I'm stressed or there's something else going on in my life that's causing some anxiety. And when we're stressed, we tend to dip back into old comfortable behavior. So that's one of my old comfortable thought processes is like, oh, you're not good enough. Do more here and then you'll be here. So totally something I still struggle with, but much less than I used to.
Hallelujah. So what's it like building? So I'm very business minded, it's something I look up to a lot of business people, I don't know why. Maybe it's because there's there's a lot of odds stacked against someone who's going to try to like build an empire. There's so many things that you have to learn, overcome. And it's like the ultimate personal development course, right? Like trying to become a successful entrepreneur. And there's some that do it the right way, or at least attempt before you get to a size where you can't manage it or keep the core values there anymore. One entrepreneur I really look up to is Howard Schultz.
Okay.
The Starbucks founder. Just grew up as an underdog, grinded it out and built this huge empire. And politically, he's right in the middle. He's like, he understands that. So economically, he's like, things cost money. Things, if you're going to implement these things, you have to pay for them somehow, et cetera, et cetera. But I love people. So this value right here is important enough that I need to find a way to pay for this. And he has a good balance, but he can't get any traction as trying to run for president because he's right in the middle. So who are you going to attract? Just like the fringe people like myself that are back and forth between the political spectrum. Is there any entrepreneurs you look up to?
A lot of them, but small scale. So my goal is always, because again, I get stuck in that comparison trap of like, I'm going to be like Chris and Lori Harder, or I'm going to be like Angie Lee, who are very like top tier entrepreneur.
Chris is from Minneapolis.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Didn't know that. But those are people who like in the industry have been seen as like having made it. And I can like look at that and think, oh, I've got so much further left to go. So what I try to do is focus on like the next tier, like who's doing what I want to do a little bit better. And what can I learn
1 year ahead of you or something.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So a lot of them are honestly like my colleagues, like people who have similar businesses to mine or doing something completely different, but they're doing it in a way that is sustainable. Maybe they're doing it whilst growing a family. So it's not something where it's like, this is all consuming my life and I'm doing nothing else, but I'm a millionaire. Like I want to see people doing what I want to do, which is having a family, also running a successful business, having a great marriage, people who are like one tier up. So a lot of them, friends and other people that I've gotten to network with in the industry, which is awesome.
Right. What's the hardest thing about building a business?
There's so many hard things.
Yeah.
So many hard things. I remind myself, like Glennon Doyle tells me that I can do hard things. That comes to mind is, this is probably just because it was recent, when you're starting a business, at least as an entrepreneur, like you wear all the hats. So like I have my zone of genius, which is coaching. I'm a great coach, not afraid to say that. But when you're running a business, you also have to be like the accountant. You also have to be the marketer. You also have to be the IT person. The other day I was trying to figure out how to code something into my website. I spent like 2 hours on Google trying to figure it out. And it's because like I don't have someone that I can just call up from the IT department, right? Like fix this for me. That's hard. And it's also frustrating because you're spending that time and it's a great investment in your business, but you're spending that time and my brain's like, but I could be doing X, Y, and Z. I could be coaching clients with this time. And instead you're having to work in your business rather than on your business.
Yeah, the E-myth. Man, that tech stuff. So I was a guy that like, I accidentally like resented tech and like just anything technology, because I grew up poor, and everyone's like, so when you're not good at stuff, it's easier to just say, oh, fuck that. That's stupid.
Right.
Like the internet or a computer. Right. So I didn't get my first computer until I was like 32 or something. And then I'm like, how do you use this thing? I'm like a chimp trying to learn how to use this. I'm like, but I'm super ambitious. So I'm like, I'm going to build a website. So I type in how to build a website. And then you hear hosting, domain, DNS, blah, 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 WordPress. I'm just like, all right, now what? And like, you get so lost, you don't even know what to Google. It's just like, when you can't come up with the next phrase that you want to search because you don't know what the next step is, it's just like, but now I could build like I could get a sales page done in like an hour and a half, like a good one, or like put a website up pretty quick, But when I was grinding it out, trying to learn, there were so many times where my wife is like, Mike, you need to go for a walk. Cause I was like ready to throw my laptop out the window, and I just bought the thing. So
it is frustrating when you're trying to figure it out. But like you said, once you have that skill set, then you actually become pretty proficient at it down the road. But
right.
Yeah,
it's not my zone of genius at all. I still hate it. I can do it, but it just sucks my soul out. By the time I'm done, I'm like, I need a beer. I don't barely ever drink, but I'm just like, So tell me about the marketing, because I'm a full-time marketer for my 9 to 5.
Oh, cool.
And I like marketing. I like business in general. And you seem pretty comfortable on Instagram and like putting yourself out there. Was it always like that?
No, I don't think it was always like that. I mean, I feel like I get along with people. So I've never had a hard time talking to people. Like, having a conversation in the DMs is gold. Love it. Like, tell me about your life. Let's have a chat. Love that. But I think the hard part for me to learn was people want to see your real life. Like, they don't want this fake Barbie talking at them with like, here's everything you need to know. And here's how my life looks perfect. And look at this salad I ate for lunch. And also, like, look at me in my fit outfit working out. Like, I think I tried to project a more professional persona. Not that I'm not professional now, but I just show you more me, like my personality. And I talk to people about the fact that I am an introvert, and like, that's something that people love hearing about. Or like, I've recently shared on stories that we're starting the adoption process. People love being able to weigh in on that. So it's not just like salad pics and, Fitspo, which there's enough of that on the internet.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw my video. I was in the middle of a workout. I'm like, so the gym I go to is like in a pretty nice area, whatever. Attracts a certain clientele, I should say. And I'm looking around. I admire the people that are like working hard but not perfect, But I'm looking around, I'm like, that is for sure a fake ass. Those are fake lips. Personality is probably fake. She's doing a fake laugh to her friend. And I'm like, I get two emotions. I'm like, man, that's really sad that she's not comfortable just being herself, And then I'm like, man, it's sad that people are gonna, what do you say, reaffirm, like, oh wow, I love your new lips or whatever. It's like, man, you just feed into it. Or like on Instagram, it's always the girl who's standing there in the pose that she worked so hard to get, with the, it took 14 different angles to get the ass shot, but now she has it. And that's the one that we reward in the masses. Right. Especially as like dumb cavemen. This is like, oh, like, I like that. Even though it's like the same shit you see everywhere, and probably took 7 shots to get that lighting perfect. And like, why do we reinforce that? We're just like telling people, yeah, we love fakeness. So
I
it's
think
like,
we love the false ideal, right? Like
yeah,
if I, once again, look like that, if I have an ass like her, then I will be good enough, right? It's the same thing. We're constantly being sold this like morality in a workout or in a body composition. But like you said, it took them 17 frames just to get that shot. And then they take a step out and like let all their rolls hang out like a normal person. So it's fake. It's not real.
there's been so many people that I've met from Instagram that are kind of similar to that. Perfect pictures only the perfect video. One, everything's scripted out. Then I meet them in person. I'm like, are you the same person? Like, what's going on here? Like,
wait, I can't recognize you without the filter on. What's going on?
yeah. And you know what's sexy to me? Here's what's sexy to me. As someone either brave enough, maybe they're not comfortable in their own skin yet, or comfortable enough to say, here I am in all my glory. I don't care if you like it. Here it is.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's attractive. Someone that's like willing either to be courageous like that, which is kind of like a trap, especially with social media, because you can get like super praised for being unhealthy or like, you're so brave. And then they're like, well, now that's my identity. I'm the person that eats shitty all the time because that's what people reinforce, So that's a danger. But the person that is just like, so here I am. I know there's things I could be better. This is me. You like it? Good. I'm your person. You don't? You can kiss my ass because here's what it is.
I think people respond better to that, at least in my experience. And I know maybe it's like the audience you cultivate, but I think when I'm the most transparent, like I'm having a really terrible day, or, I ate like a 5-year-old yesterday and I'm feeling like garbage, but you know what?
I love chicken nuggets.
Who doesn't love chicken nuggets? I'm going to start over again today. That's what people are like, oh my gosh, she's a person. I am the same, right? Like, I think that's when we are able to be truly in connection with people because we're not pretending to be like better.
Mm-hmm. So, Miss Introvert, I know we're kind of going long here, but what is some of your goals for 2022? Do you set goals?
Ooh,
Some people are against. Goals. Okay, me too. I just like something to aim at,
Yeah, I'm all about goals. Speaking of James Clear, though, he does a really great job. I think he has a quote that says, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems, which I'm a big believer in. So setting a goal is awesome. It's also as easy as saying, I want to lose 30 pounds. That you do no work, right? To set the goal. The work happens with the systems, the processes, the habits that you create, the structures that you build to get to that goal. So I'm all about setting goals because I think it's a great mile marker, but I don't think setting a goal is enough. Then you have to have some systems. So part of my goal is to be on a wait list for a baby to adopt. So my husband and I have finished our home study. Tomorrow, we actually have 2 meetings with 2 different consultants so we can figure out which one we feel connected with. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll have a new family member by the time the year is over.
Sweet.
I also have a goal to play more this year. So as a business owner, as someone who is very forward movement oriented, I don't take a lot of time to like stop and play and just have fun. And I need to. I understand that that's healthy for me. I also love having fun. So we have a 13-month-old golden retriever puppy, just like spending more time away from my computer screen and having a good time. We moved down here so that we can have some fun with family. So just doing some more of that and carving more of that into my life is a goal. Yeah. And I would also like to hit, this is one of my career goals. So I hired a co-coach in 2021 so that she can help me move forward, helping more women, impacting more lives. And I would love to fill her roster this year. So that is one of my business goals so that we can book her out with women who are looking to create healthy eating habits and lose body fat without dieting.
Yeah, that's one thing about the coaching space that's difficult, right? It's like, there's only a couple of ways to scale. It's like, find more awesome coaches that have the same belief system as you, values, etc., or go the course route. It's like, and if it's very personal for you, the coach thing is not, or the course thing is not very attractive, because it's like, disconnected. But then you think, what could help more people? It's hard to say. Like people.
I tried the course thing. I did the same thing. So at first I didn't think I wanted to grow a team because I'm very independent. And I was like, no, I just want to be in control of me. Like, I don't want to have to like, bring other people into the loop, which sounds very selfish now that I'm talking about it. But I started a course, ran the course. And what I realized was I wasn't actually helping people get long-term results, because without accountability, half the equation is gone, right? Like, people don't just need more education, more information. You could Google for hours and find all the answers to your questions if you really wanted to, right?
Yeah.
But it's having someone actually help you do the things you need to do, and to build those systems and to build the habits we talked about. So I was really turned off by the self-led course that's just like, here you go, here, give me a chunk of change and I'll give you all the answers. And it was it wasn't for me. So now we do the group coaching thing, and with Lauren's help, we can grow our roster and
right. Sweet. Okay. Well, let me know if I can help.
I will.
I can help in some way. I have a lot of people that follow me for personal development, which is like books. It's everything, basically. It's life in general, and health and fitness is a big part of that. My coach personally is my brother, because we just know each other so well. He can just call me out on my bullshit. Like, we have that camaraderie where he knows my hot buttons.
He knows your raw spots. Yeah.
Right. Or he knows when I tell him something a certain way, he's like, that's a lie. Go ahead and tell me what you really ate. So I wish you luck on that, and so tell everybody where they can find you. I'll put some links on the social medias and in the podcast apps.
Very easy to find me. I'm always hanging out on Instagram when I'm not away from my phone, having fun. That is
right.
Instagram handle is @nutrition with Nicole, and website has all the info, nutritioncoachingwithnicole.com. So
you have an H
to find me. Sorry?
H in your name? H or no H?
No H. Oh, that was a great question.
Right.
I never get asked that question.
Nicole.
Yeah. My mom always used to say there's no hole in your name, because she would get annoyed by people that would spell it with an H. I honestly don't care, but if you're trying to find me online, no H.
Yeah. So I go by Mike, but my name is a little different too. It's actually Mikel.
Okay. Yeah. So you get it.
Yeah. Everyone calls me Mikel, but it's not my name. My mom. So my mom has like a 5th grade education. She named me Michael. Sound it out. Mike L.
That makes sense.
Right. But everyone thinks I'm like French or from Germany or Russia or something. Like, no, just me. Just me. I love it now, because it's completely different.